fairly cloudy. And that all adds up to a very mild night, with temperatures certainly in the south staying in the teens and double digits further north. But it will be a wet and windy start to Wednesday across much of northern Britain and down across Wales. Heavy bursts of rain, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Everything being buffeted by those strong winds as well. There are Met Office yellow warnings in place. The rain across the east will arrive late morning into the early part of the afternoon, lingering across East Anglia and the southeast till the middle of the afternoon. Behind that rain, and most places will brighten up through the morning, we'll see sunny spells and showers, but a fresher feel. Temperatures actually could be lower in the afternoon than in the morning, despite some afternoon sunshine. Those gusty winds making it feel cooler, and those gusty winds just continuing to throw showers in across Scotland and Northern Ireland as we go through tomorrow night. By the time we get to Thursday, we're left with a mixture of sunshine and showers. Certainly lots of showers, still on a brisk wind for Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of North Wales, North West England, but not too many showers getting to eastern parts of England or across the South Midlands, South Wales and southern England. Some good spells of sunshine likely on Thursday. Still quite windy, but a bright and blustery day, not as windy as Wednesday, and temperatures a little higher in the mid to high teens.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of Farage with me, Laurence Fox. Slightly different show for you tonight. Having had 5 full days' experience in presenting television, I thought it would be a good opportunity to up the stakes a little.
Laurence.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm very good. Good evening, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm very good. What a great voice you have. Wow, that's a great voice.
Thank you very much. You can just hear the fear in my voice, can't you? Anyway, so tonight, in a worldwide exclusive, I am honoured to talk with the man himself. That's right, it's time for Trump. But first, the headlines.
Thanks, Laurence. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Chancellor has exclusively told GB News his medium-term fiscal plan will not be brought forward and will be delivered as planned at the end of November. Kwasi Kwarteng is under pressure to give more details on how he'll reduce the country's debt. It follows market turmoil, which saw sterling plummet after the mini-budget was announced 11 days ago. The Chancellor told us fiscal decisions were made during a difficult period.
It was a very quick time that we did it. And also you've got to remember the context. I mean, what was extraordinary about that month was that we had a new government and also we had the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So we had a nation in mourning. And then literally, I think 4 days after the funeral, we had the mini budget. It was high speed, high pressure environment. And we could have got, as David Cameron used to say, prepared the pitch a bit better.
Well, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she's written to Kwasi Kwarteng demanding greater transparency.
This coming Friday, when the Office of Budget Responsibility gives the government their forecast, the public should see it as well, and financial markets need to see it. The volatility that we've had in the last week and a half with a huge spike in borrowing costs for government and also for families through mortgage rates is causing huge anxiety. And government now need to get a grip, publish those forecasts. If they've got nothing to hide, what is stopping them?
The Home Secretary says we need common sense policing unashamedly on the side of the law-abiding majority. Speaking at the Tory party conference, Suella Braverman urged the police to investigate every neighbourhood crime and to stop, quote, policing pronouns on Twitter. She also promised to publish league tables to show how well each force is doing. The Home Secretary slammed what she called militants and extremists on the left and said she would lock up protesters such as Extinction Rebellion who break the law.
It's not a human right to vandalise property. It's not my freedom of expression to protest violently. No, you can't just start a riot or glue yourself to the roads and get away with it.
And in other news, a 14-year-old boy is in custody after being arrested on suspicion of the murder of another teenager in Gateshead. Northumbria Police says it found a 14-year-old boy with injuries consistent with having been caused by a bladed article just after 8 o'clock last night. A 13-year-old girl also remains in custody after being arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Farage.
In 2008, following an inspirational campaign of optimism and hope, America chose charismatic young senator from Illinois to be their 44th president. The question as to whether those United States could put their troubled past behind them and come together under its first black president seemed to have been answered with a resounding, yes, we can. America is a wonderful idea, a truly successful multiracial experiment, one nation under God. It seemed to me and to everybody that a corner had been turned in history. From the horrors of slavery through Jim Crow to Martin Luther King, the United States seemed to have finally and firmly united against racism. And they had a handsome, highly intelligent, erudite and affable symbol of their commitment to the future. Things were looking good. It was not long, however, before events began to give the world pause. First, Obama embarked on an apology tour of the Middle East, reassuring America's former enemies that there was going to be a reckoning with history. However, this was not the only reckoning with history that Obama had planned. Over the course of the next 8 years, he drove deep chasms into American society and adopted policies which saw Americans standing in the world wither. The nihilistic death cult that is ISIS took full advantage of his indecision, sweeping across Iraq and Syria. In Syria, his uncrossable red lines were crossed as children gasped their last frothing, chlorine-filled breaths at the hands of Assad's helicopter henchmen. In Libya, the American embassy overran, the ambassador butchered. America, once the strong man of the world, had lost its most crucial weapon, deterrence. The days of speaking softly while carrying a big stick were over, and it wasn't only abroad that Obama's resentful dislike of his own nation prevailed. He had his eyes set on division at home as well. He stoked and promoted tribalism and racial tensions through rhetoric the likes of which had not been heard since Woodrow Wilson. And by the time he left office, Confident that the project to dismantle the Constitution would be passed into the safe hands of Hillary Clinton, America had had enough. The passing of the crown, however, was not to be. The United States, tired of the inward-looking tyranny of the majority, sought a new hope, and it came in the form of a Manhattan millionaire who wore a long red tie and waxed lyrical about making America great again. Donald Trump spoke passionately to the miners Clinton dismissed as soon to be out of a job about our beautiful coal and our jobs. He was the perfect antidote to the elitist, moral supremacists hell-bent on the impoverishment of the people in pursuit of a new utopian green woke agenda, whilst Obama opined about catastrophic sea level rises from his beach mansion just up from the water. And so the MAGA movement began. And so the 45th president was inaugurated, and so the rage to oust him went into top gear. Barely had the oath of office left his mouth than the talk of impeachments began. During his 4 years, each day under fresh attack, Trump's America became energy self-sufficient, a net exporter of energy. There were no foreign wars. He put little rocket man back in his box, then shook his hand on the 38th parallel. He savaged China with trade tariffs as they stole and copied American innovation. Black and Latino unemployment hit all-time lows. He started Space Force. He wiped out ISIS. He brokered peace deals in the Middle East. He returned al-Baghdadi to the dust. His appointments made the Supreme Court conservative. He created record jobs. He restored deterrence, so crucial to world peace. And he did this all whilst under constant attack from the ever more crazed and frothing Democrats. Following 2 impeachments and an unending media attack, he lost the 2020 general election to Joe Biden after record millions in mail ballots sealed his fate. We look across at the America that Joe Biden has awoken in these last 2 years with fear. Afghanistan, open borders, the blossoming growth of identity politics, the sanctioned mutilation of body dysmorphic children, cities where the homeless defecate openly in the streets and defunded police are left trying to cope with soaring crime, looting, shooting, and lawless living. An America without pride or purpose, desperately looking under any rock for racism and white rage, and when not finding it, giving Jussie Smollett a call. But the midterms are coming. And with an escalating crisis in the Ukraine threatening the first use of nuclear weapons in 70 years, is the MAGA movement coming back? Can America be saved? Can the world? So tonight, we want to look at our special relationship with the United States. And I'm asking you, what can we learn from MAGA? And how can we make the UK great again? I'm asking you, how can we make the UK great again? So get in touch with me at farage@gbnews.uk or tweet using the hashtag Farage on GB News. Well, tonight it was my greatest honour to speak to the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. It was, as expected, an explosive interview, and I asked him what he thought of our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, her difficult start, her economics, and I got the royalist that is President Trump on King Charles. Here's what he said. You've had, I believe, 2.1 million illegal migrants cross the border this year, and in the UK we've had 30,000, a record immigration across the Channel. Yeah. What advice would you give to our new Prime Minister who is having trouble to stem this flow of illegal immigration? What would you say to her?
Well, I like some of the things she's done, and she seems very nice, very good. But I like some of the things. You know, it's inverse. A lot of times finance is inverse. I cut taxes very substantially, and we did much more business. And she's done that. And I know she's taken some hits for it, which surprises me, actually. But it could be at the end of the year, you'll do bigger revenues. It's going to be very interesting. What she did is very inverse to what some people thought. But that doesn't mean they were right. I have a feeling she might be right. But I think very highly of her. And she had a great send-off from the Queen. That was the last one of the Queen's send-offs. So that was a big deal, right?
Yes, it was a truly momentous day, and it was so lovely to see the world, the eyes of the world on Britain, and Britain do such a wonderful job of saying goodbye to such a fantastic public servant. What do you think?
Well, you know, my mother came from Scotland. My mother was from Scotland, Stornoway. So that's serious Scotland, right? I call that. That's deep into the heart of Scotland. That's no games, right?
Absolutely.
That's not the border. And she loved the Queen, and she loved the whole thing with the royal family. She really had great respect for the Queen and the royal family. She loved what it represented. So it's very interesting.
Can I ask you on the subject of the royalty? Prince Charles, who has been famously outspoken on this very, the green woke agenda, but the Green New Deal for England and environmentalism. What do you make of him? Do you think he's going to carry on that into his reign, or do you think he should keep his mouth closed on these issues?
Well, I think he'll be different. Now, I know him very well, or quite well, and I spent a lot of time when I was over there as president with him. And with his wife, was absolutely lovely, by the way. And we had a good time together. And so I'm a little prejudiced when I say it, but, he has a strong view on things. Probably difficult when you're the king. You want to have 100% of the people love you, like the Queen did. The Queen had everybody loved her, right? She didn't have that kind of an agenda, and yet, she was a very strong woman. I got to know her too. She was a very strong woman, a great woman. I think Charles is going to do very well. I think he's got a great way about him. I thought he looked very good during the ceremony. Not an easy thing to do, but I think Charles is going to do very well. I think he'll probably keep it where it's politically a little bit, because he feels very strong about certain things, and not everybody agrees with that. I think he'll probably not discuss certain elements of what he believes 100%.
How do we make England great again?
Well, it's very interesting because Boris was a friend of mine, and perhaps still is. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but Boris was a friend, and I think the biggest problem Boris has is he went liberal all of a sudden. He went to the other side, and I think that was just crazy because he's a good man, but something happened to him. He changed, and he went, for the windmills all over the place, and he went for, he went a little bit wokier than I believe he really is, and I think ultimately that was the thing that really got him out. I don't believe it was the party. I think the party was just an excuse. But he's a good guy, but he changed. He was a conservative guy, and he became much less than conservative, and I think a lot of people didn't like it. They didn't like it.
Well, as you heard there, President Trump was full of praise when it comes to the UK's new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and her grand plans. Despite the flack, her Chancellor's small budget has also received. He also said that Charles III will make a great king, and reflected on Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's passing. To discuss this and more, I'm joined now by Susan Platt, former Chief of Staff to Joe Biden when he was a senator. Good evening, Susan.
Good evening, Laurence. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Susan, what do you make of President Trump's take on Liz Truss's economic plans for the UK?
Well, needless to say, I tend to disagree with most everything that comes out of the former president's mouth. I will have to say that, I hope that we have a great relationship, which we always have, with the United Kingdom, and I hope that continues. And I know the president feels that way as well. I think it's been interesting how the only thing really that Donald Trump accomplished when he was president, let's say in a positive way for some, was to cut the tax rate for corporations and for large wealthy business owners and wealthy people. What we've got now is something that, Joe Biden is trying to bring us all back from COVID. And we are coming back. There are more people employed in the United States now than ever have been. We've all suffered quite a bit during COVID. I think, there was a joke when Trump was president about infrastructure week. Well, now we finally have infrastructure, and people are saying how wonderful it is to reinvest. And we've just dealt with a horrible, horrible hurricane, that those funds will go to help and hopefully more. But the president is focused on reducing inflation. He's actually accomplishing that. Gas prices are down for, I believe, 100 and some days now, or 14 weeks. And that's in the right direction. But one other thing that we talked about at the very beginning, can America be saved? Donald Trump continued on to something that was so divisive. And yes, our country is suffering right now. And thank goodness Joe Biden is helping to bring us back together again and talks about trying to save our democracy. You know, he gave a very heart-rendered speech in Philadelphia a few weeks ago, and I was honored to be there for that speech. And it was really a clarion call to those of us that, or those that went to the dark side for a while, if you will.
Did he not go to the dark side? It looked like a speech delivered from the Emperor's lair in Star Wars. I just want to pull you up a bit on a couple of things you've said there. The first being that gas prices are now down. Is that not down to the fact that he's just draining the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? And inflation.
No, I think it's down to a lot of different things. There's a lot of things happening. And we just passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Things are starting to move. Donald Trump does not want to hear that. Donald Trump wants this country to be divisive. Donald Trump is putting us in danger.
53% of Republicans say that they're going to support him if he stands in a primary. Is it worth pointing out that Donald Trump may be the bogeyman, but the MAGA agenda of small government, cheap gas, energy self-sufficiency, optimism in America's place in the world and its strong place in the world is something that Joe Biden cannot deliver.
The MAGA agenda is about dividing people. It's not about helping people. It's not about helping to bridge divides. It's like, who's the biggest bully? Who can be the most divisive? And it's about power. Like the crazy man, Putin, we have a crazy man, Trump, who just yearns for power and putting others down. Joe Biden is such an effective leader and an effective legislator to move this country forward. We're having an election here in a couple of weeks. We'll see what happens, but I think we may turn history on what normally happens in midterms, and we may actually come out on a better end because Republicans are fighting a cultural war. Joe Biden is trying to lift this all up.
Susan, thank you very much for speaking to me, and thank you for agreeing to disagree, of which I...
Can I just say one thing? We all had great respect for your queen, and we all really felt for the family. Those of us that have lost people know they must have been having a difficult time. So I send my best to you.
And we need to find things that bring us together and not use the rhetoric that was used in that disgraceful speech by Biden in Philadelphia the other week. Thank you very much. Right, I am joined now by Greg Swenson, who's from Republicans Aboard. Greg, thank you so much for coming in. How are you doing?
It's great. Got a kick out of the guest.
Yeah.
Loved your monologue, but got a kind of a chuckle out of Susan. It's a tough one. It's really hard to defend.
How do we talk? Because the most important thing in life is everyone feels like they're right. You know, I feel passionately like I'm right all the time, and it's usually a sign of the fact that I might be wrong and I need to engage with people and talk. How do we talk across the aisle to someone who is saying that the Biden speech in Philadelphia, which to me was where he labelled half the country essentially terrorists and goaded people, and we've had a young man murdered and killed.
Yeah.
What do we do, as far as I can see, the sane people left in the room, to get a sane moderate Democrat to communicate? What is the answer?
Yeah, I'm not sure who it is or if there is one right now, but perhaps one will emerge. But when you listen to Susan and other people, not just her, and I'm not picking on her, but you know, if they're speaking about things that are just clearly untrue. You know, to say Biden is unifying, he campaigned as a unifier. I'll give him that much.
Well,
but you know, and then he's passed this horrific legislation that's hurt most working people with inflation, and without one Republican vote. You know, so there's no reaching across the aisle here. I mean, there's been no legislation that's unifying. And then he had the satanic curtain speech where he basically, as you said, Laurence, you know, called half the country terrorists. And, you know, you've had that from Merrick Garland calling parents who are interested in their children's education and didn't want them learning about transgender theory when they were 6 years old, they were domestic terrorists. You know, there was a memo that went out that said that. So that's not unifying, calling parents who care about their children domestic terrorists. So there's such a disconnect between what they say. And I think, look, you're always going to have some crazies on the right and the radical left, but you hear actual truths from the right. You know, there's just facts, right? Biden has wrecked the economy. Biden's Afghanistan pullout was a disaster. The border is open. So Kamala goes, in front of the press and says, the border is closed. Everything's working really well. Biden says there is no inflation, or it's transitory. Just tell the truth. And if you make some mistakes, just kind of, try to own up to it. I know that's not one that politicians like to do, but Biden's been, and the administration, have been particularly horrible at telling the truth. So the dishonesty starts to pile up, and that's why voters get frustrated. And they go to MAGA rallies because they just hear this insanity from the radical progressive left and the media who's, for the most part, on their team.
Where is the left? Where is the actual left? The left that supported the blue-collar workers?
Yeah,
where have they gone?
They've disappeared. I mean, this was the party of the working class. This was the party of abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And now it's the party of taxpayer-funded, whenever you want it, up until birth, right? Yeah. So, they've radicalized. Now, do I think every Democrat is radicalized? I don't think so. It's really just this, maybe it's 10% of this radical progressive left. The problem is the radical progressive left controls Biden, controls the government, controls the universities, controls the media. So they have the institutions and the arts as well. I mean, if not just Hollywood, but, the Art Institute of Chicago, where this once great, institution has been absolutely corrupted by this woke progressive left minority. It really is a minority. So I don't think the average Democrat is as radical, but they're used to voting Democrat, and they just pulled a ticket, and they hear Joe Biden say we're going to unify the country, and he slaps them on the back, and
And what would you? I agree with you. What would you say that in terms of what President Trump was saying about Liz Truss, which I was surprised by because I thought he would be a bit more disparaging, but he was very complimentary of her. What do you think about what he was saying about Liz Truss in the UK?
He's completely right. And during the Trump administration, on many media appearances, sometimes defending him, sometimes criticizing him, I always defended his economic policy. And I said the UK and the rest of the world should take a page out of the US playbook, which at the time was the Trump playbook. Now, much of it was traditional Republican, deregulation, lower taxes. But he got on board with that. Paul Ryan was a big part of that as well, and who's now treated as kind of an old Republican or an establishment Republican. But they worked together on that, and the outcomes were incredible. So I just don't understand why the UK couldn't have picked up a few of those ideas. Liz Truss and Kwasi finally have. 2 years later, and whereas Biden unwound every one of those policies. So now you've had, negative wage growth, 3% negative wage growth, whereas Trump's last 2 years, it was 6.3%, but much higher for minorities, much higher for those in the bottom quartile. All the things that the Democrats claim they want.
All the facts that they
the identity
want
groups. I mean, they're absolutely controlled, not controlled by identity groups, but they're dependent on the identity groups. That's all they have. Identity politics is all they have because their policies are so wrong or so bad.
Well, we want them to switch back to. We want them to switch back to defending the blue collar workers.
Sure,
which is why they exist.
Or acknowledge that the policies of Trump and the right actually benefit those very identity groups that they're so obsessed about and creating all this division. It's really sad. But,
it is.
But I'm glad to see the president supported Liz Truss on this because those are the policies that worked. And Biden paraded out this Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, who was the former governor of Rhode Island, who used to be a sensible Democrat. She fought against the unions, with pension reform. And she just was paraded out there and said that deregulation, tax reform, and smaller government is an economic policy that's never worked. So
good luck
what about the 80s and the 90s, right?
I know. Greg, thank you so much for coming.
It's
a pleasure to have you. And we're now going to head to a break. That's Greg Swenson from Republicans Abroad. Up next, hear what President Trump told me on the Ukraine war, his relationship with Putin, North Korea, and China. You won't want to miss it.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome back. Your reactions to my audience question tonight on the back of my world-exclusive interview with the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. I asked you, how can we make the UK great again? One viewer says, if you want to make Britain great, get rid of the Tories. Stop it now. Grant, we can start by getting rid of Sadiq Khan. Well, he's not, fortunately, in a position of massive power yet, but I completely agree with you. Another viewer says, we need Trump here. Well, we need MAGA here. Do we need Trump here? Who knows? Peter says, unfortunately, we don't have a Trump here in the UK. None of the politicians here in the UK have the British people's interests at heart. Most of them are globalists. Yes, I agree with you there. I'm not disagreeing. Maria, we need not cave or apologise for conservative views if lefties or social media don't like it, which is interesting, actually, because Section 230, which is what I wanted to talk to you about Trump, with President Trump, I didn't get there too. Right, next, continuing on with my world-exclusive interview with Donald Trump, he was in a fantastic mood with me, but he got serious when I asked him about the Russia-Ukraine war, now in its 7th month. His relationship with the Russian leader, North Korea, where they've been firing ballistic missiles over Japan, and of course China, following news today that two of our biggest phone networks, Vodafone and the Chinese-owned 3, are in talks to merge. Take a listen. So now we're 7 months into this war in Ukraine. What do you think? Is Putin done for? What's your take on it? And what would President Trump be doing today?
Well, I'd be taking accolades because it would have never been a war. It would have never happened. What's happened now is there are no winners. There can never be a winner in this. The cities have been blown to pieces. Probably hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. You know, when they blow up a city and they say 2 people have been injured, you know that's not so. They're fake reports. But tremendous amounts of people have been killed, and the country can never really be the same. You just look at the destruction. Some of those incredible old buildings that are, just flattened, with plenty of people in them too when they got flattened. So it's a shame. It would have never happened if I were president. It would have never ever happened. Do you think America is? I hate to see what's going on.
Do you think America has lost its deterrence? I mean, when you were in office, there were no foreign wars. There was record employment in Black and Latino employment. The borders were closed. You had low immigration. People were respectful of America's deterrence. Do you think that America has lost its deterrence, and how does it get it back?
Well, I think it did. When they went, Laurence, when they withdrew from Afghanistan in that matter, I'm the one that got it down to withdraw. I was going to withdraw from Afghanistan, but we were going to do it with real strength. We didn't lose one soldier, Laurence, in 18 months in Afghanistan. And then we had a rigged election. And then what happened is they took over, and all of a sudden it was a whole different thing with the Taliban. And then they actually killed, as you know, at least 7 of our soldiers, probably much more than that, but 13 of our soldiers is, I think, a number that they're starting to give. But that's a lot, and we had a lot of very horribly wounded. You know, nobody ever talks about that. We had horribly wounded with legs and arms and all of the other things, and we didn't lose one over a period of 18 months. Think of it. And the way we withdrew, it looked like it was such an embarrassment to our country. I really think Putin saw that, and he said maybe this is his chance to do what he's wanted to do. But he would have never done it with me. I knew him very well. He would have never done it with me. No chance, zero. And you may have a problem now with President Xi in China having to do with Taiwan.
Yeah, and now we have General Milley much more interested in white rage, hunting out the white rage in it. The deaths of American soldiers by the white-skinned American soldiers, working-class, honest American men coming back in their coffins at twice the rate of their demography. It's an absolute shame. Moving on, sir, to China. In the UK today, it has been announced that the 2 biggest phone networks, Vodafone and Chinese-owned Three, are in talks to merge. Do you think the UK should push back against Chinese influence, specifically in the technology area?
Well, when I was in charge of the U.S., I did not want to make a deal with China and didn't, having to do with the phone systems, and Huawei was willing to do a deal. But everybody that I spoke to, and some of these people were really good, say that if they do that, they can absolutely spy on our country. In other words, you're giving up tremendous security. It was a big security concern. And I dealt with really good people. These were not woke people in the military. These were the real deal. And they really said, we lose a lot. There's a potential to lose a lot having to do with security. And you understand that. So I chose not to do that. I didn't know that you were going the way of doing it. But I chose not to do it.
And do you think, again,
this is a very big price to pay?
Again, this sign of now America's weakness, that North Korea has fired its first ballistic missile in 5 years over Japan. Now, this certainly wouldn't have happened under President Trump. What,
no.
Do you think this is, again, little rocket man wouldn't have had his time then, would he?
Well, I got along with him. You know, I actually got along with him and Kim Jong-un. And it started off very rough. Remember, I called him Little Rocket Man, and he was saying, I have a red button on my desk. I say, my button's bigger and my button works. And, you know, it started off very rough. And then we became very friendly. I have a lot of respect for him, actually, in a very strong way, because, you know, I understand him. We're different places, different countries, different ways, so you have to understand the opponent. But I had a very good relationship with him. No, this would not have happened. This would not have happened. And we lost a great gentleman, as you know, from Japan, Prime Minister Abe. He was great. And I wonder what he would have said. But that is a terrible, what happened is that, you know, it's sort of incredible that it would happen. It looked like the United States was going to end up going to war with North Korea, by the way. And it ended up just the opposite. We got along. In fact, they worked on the Olympics together with South Korea. That's when it all started. I got a call saying that he'd like to talk about the Olympics. You know, the Olympics in South Korea was going nowhere. Nobody wanted to buy a ticket because they didn't want to be in a stadium when it got blown up, right? And then we worked a deal where they were going to be involved in the Olympics and participate. It was an amazing thing, you know. I don't get much credit. You do because you're a great actor, but I never get credit for things. But ultimately, people figure it out. But so I took that Olympics and made it from empty stadiums into a very successful Olympics, and it was a great thing. But no, he does not have a lot of respect for the current administration. I will say that.
We can now talk to Robert Weiner, former spokesman for the Clinton and Bush administrations, now Democratic strategist. Good evening, Mr. Weiner. How are you doing?
I'm good, Laurence, but boy, talk about a distorted view of his own self-worth. I'm astounded at the creepy things he said. You know, he gave in to Putin on Syria. He gave in to Putin on war games in Korea. And he got 3 times the valuation. He's being hammered for it now on all the properties he sold to all the Russians in both Miami and New York. This guy was after nothing but money for himself, and he's being rightfully shut down by the prosecutors the same way that they shut down his charity and his college. They were frauds. This guy is a total fraud, only out for himself, and that's why he's at 30%, and Biden's got him over, by some 15 points in popularity right now.
Tell me what you really think. Let's break some of that down. So start with your first allegation.
Well, they're not allegations. The fact is that he triple priced his receipts from the Russians for his properties in Florida and in New York. And that's actually what he's being charged with is overvaluation, undervaluation in so many ways by the New York prosecutor.
But it's a private company. You can overprice whatever you want if it's a private company. It's not illegal. You can do whatever you want. It's a private company.
That's just lovely, except when you lie to the IRS and you lie on your forms.
What's your next point after that one? So your first point, your second point is that he's down in the polls against Biden. Would it be true for me to say that Biden has a historically low approval rating, not seen for many, many decades?
No, because he's come back up 10 points, as you know, since that last speaker was saying Biden didn't accomplish anything.
Since he told the 1/2 of America that they were all terrorists.
And all. What?
Well, since maybe his polls bounced a bit once he decided to stand in front of blood-red flags with Marines and tell 1/2 of America that they were MAGA extremists. Of course he's going to get a bump from the extremist side of the argument. Your next allegation was which?
The extremists, when you talk about the court that he made 6-3 by bludgeoning
he didn't make the court 6-3. He had to replace the justices, and we currently have the first justice.
He had Garland as a replacement, and he blocked him.
Excuse me, I'm talking. Ketanji Brown can't even tell you what a woman is, and she's sitting on the Supreme Court. So I think I'd rather go with the conservative view on that one. Now look, how can you and I reach across the aisle to talk about stuff? It sounds like you've turned up on a TV and pretty wound up with me, telling me your view. Now, what do you think that Trump said about China, Ukraine, and Russia was wrong? And then we can start a conversation.
People haven't forgotten, do me a favor, though, phone call. They haven't forgotten to find me 11,780 votes in Georgia. This guy, there's a reason that your country voted in Parliament not to have him come over, but your wonderful royalty did want him to come, and Boris Johnson did want him to come and all that. But there's a reason for the fact that he was an embarrassment to the world, and now the credibility of the United States has been restored. Granted, Biden is 79 years old, and granted, I'm 76. Granted, he forgets a few things. But he is a wonderful, decent human being who has reached across the aisle.
Well, what's so great, Robert, what is so great is that you should definitely have another espresso. And thank you for showing the world why we're so divided. Robert Weiner, thank you, former spokesman for Clinton and the Bush administration, National Democratic strategist. Kill me now. What a depressing way of talking to people. OK, let's see if we can make some progress here somehow. Chris Parry, Rear Admiral, retired British Navy officer. Let's just talk little, simple, standard military stuff. Talk me through it.
Well, we've got an interesting world at the moment.
In regards, sorry to interrupt you, but in regards to what Trump is saying and how you feel about what...
I mean, I think he's right. I think when Trump was in power, I think he was perceived to be very unpredictable. I don't think he was unpredictable. I think he was perceived to be so. And certainly when I was dealing with Chinese and Russian academics, they would say to me, look, we knew how to play Bush, Clinton and Obama. How do you play Trump? And I said, look, you can't. He's not your sort of textbook politician. He has an instinctive approach to these things. And a lot of his intuition was very good. And I think once one gets over the fact that his thumbs and his mouth tend to get detached from his brain occasionally, he actually has some good ideas. They are sound. And when he says Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine on his watch, I think he's right.
I think he's right. As a leader of men, which you...
And women.
And women.
Yeah.
But, you know, I use the royal we of men. But as a leader of men and women, do you need amongst the ranks that sort of impetuosity, that sort of Dionysian anti-hero? You know, do you need those characters to motivate troops and the like?
You need a mixture, Laurence. You need what I call regulators, those who are basically authoritarian in organisation, and you need rat catchers. Those people who use their initiative, those people who are prepared to display dissent and do the right thing when they see the circumstances change. That's the Nelson touch in the Navy, the ability to say, look, I see the signal to withdraw, but you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm winning this battle. Of course, we encourage that. I'm afraid in peacetime, that sort of behaviour is discouraged, and you're never going to make it to the top in peacetime. But in wartime, those people are good. You need to protect them in peacetime so they're available to you. Otherwise, you're running a war really by military bureaucrats. And this is what Russia's finding. The sort of people that were slavishly subordinate to the politicians and the mafia groups that run Russia don't know how to run a war. And that's why they're losing. Added to the fact, of course, the Ukrainians are prepared to die for their country, but the Russians aren't prepared to die for Ukraine.
Absolutely. And finally, on this idea of deterrence, is it how crucial is it in the theatre of war?
Well, if you get your deterrence right, you won't have to go to war. And the basic principle is your opponent has got to believe that the disadvantages outweigh the benefits of using violence. And deterrence failed totally with regard to Ukraine because the West has had a strategy of wishful thinking. That is not a strategy. I'm afraid that is appeasement, and that is a short route to war because, as the Israelis will tell you, weakness, whether political or military, is a provocation to the bad guys in the world.
Chris Parry, ladies and gentlemen, sensible, thank heavens. Right, so now joining me now is Angela Knight, former Tory MP and Economic Secretary to the Treasury, who will be able to dissect President Trump's backing of Liz Truss over her economic policy. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
What is your reaction to Trump's assertion that Liz Truss is right when it comes to handling the British economy?
I'm not surprised that he said that because in many respects, some of the statements that she has made, they do rather fit with US policy and US economic policy, in whether it is actually Biden or whether it is Trump. One of the things that I do now is I do sit on the board of a US company. And I certainly see their difference of view compared with ourselves in a lot of areas, of which tax and spend are two very critical ones. US tax, as you know, tends to be low, and their social security and welfare tends to also to be low. And they're a big country. They have their views, we have ours. And so when I'm thinking about Liz Truss's statement, then I am not surprised that Donald Trump, it kind of fitted, at least with some of his views, though I do confess I prefer her immensely to him as a politician.
Well, and you're entitled to that opinion, and Trump upping the Truss is no bad thing for us. So thank you, Angela Knight, former Tory MP and Economic Secretary of State to Treasury. Right, now, coming up, more from my chat with Sir Don, this time on whether he will run in 2024. Don't miss it, I made him some promises.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Bad news, team. The GB News bar is not open, but I got a pint of Guinness. So welcome back to the final part of my world-exclusive interview with Donald Trump. I spoke to him about the upcoming midterms, Joe Biden, and of course all the important questions of whether he will stand in 2024. So here it is. There's been a very promising poll out today saying that 54% of Republicans would back you in the primaries in 2024. But before that, we've got the midterms coming on November the 8th, and the candidates that you've endorsed are doing fantastically well. Do you predict a red wave coming on November the 8th?
So you would think that with all of the problems, all of these incredible problems that we have in this country, that the Republicans would win in a landslide, and I don't know if that's going to be soon. We should, strong on crime, strong on borders, strong on everything that matters, and the other ones are, you know, they want windmills all over the place, just like Europe is putting windmills. The windmills are destroying the fields. They're destroying the fields, and it's the most expensive energy you can have, and they want open borders, which you don't have to worry about. But, boy, I'll tell you, in this country, the open borders have been a disaster. So I would think the Republicans would do very well. Just on the crime issue alone, I think they'd do very well.
And now that we're watching what's happening to you in America, certainly with the raid on Mar-a-Lago and, you know, what's going on with CNN and various things, do you think that the DOJ and the FBI and the CIA are now the political law enforcement arm of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, right now it looks like that, which is very seriously a problem for the country. But right now it would certainly look, it's called weaponization. They've weaponized law enforcement, and nobody thought that was even something possible. And this probably isn't Biden. This is probably people around him. And many people know who they would be, including me. So, you know, you have weaponization. And, of course, the problem is when the shoe fits, you wear it. But, you know, those shoes, they turn. And then the other side ends up doing the same thing. We didn't do that. The other side ends up doing the same thing. And they end up being very nasty. And you know somebody very well. It's called Hunter. And, you know, they could have a field day with that stuff. So it's a very tricky situation. But it is weaponization of the of justice. It's a very dangerous thing that's happening.
And thank you so I agree with you so much. Thank you so much for talking to me. Just one final question. If I promise to play you in the movie Trump 2024, will you run for president again?
Oh, I think I'd have to consider that strongly. You would be great. I have a face like that and a voice like that. I would be thrilled to have you. And I'll be letting that out pretty soon. You know, a lot of people want me to do it. The polls are all very strong and all that, stronger than they've ever been, which is incredible. But they see all the bad things that are happening.
President Trump, thank you so much for talking to me, and we look forward to your announcement to run in 2024.
Oh, that's a great honor. And say hello to Nigel and everybody, and I will see you. Congratulations on a great job, too, Laurence.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
I cannot wait to play Donald Trump in Trump 2024, the movie. Anyway, we can speak now to author and journalist Alan Freeman, who's written a book on Donald Trump called This Is Not America. Alan, is the America you find yourself in now America?
Well, you know, America is a divided country. We're split pretty much down the middle, 50-50, with the Trump supporters on the one side and the anti-Trump people on the other side. And I think that, you know, I'm not going to comment on some of the things Trump said in that interview because he was repeating certain conspiracy theories and the Hunter Biden laptop. And
Whoa! I played Hunter Biden. What do you mean conspiracy theories?
I'm sure you would be an excellent Hunter Biden. I can see you have star quality. What I'm saying is something different. Donald Trump is like a broken record to us Americans. We hear this stuff at all his rallies, and lately he's been holding the QAnon symbol up to the crowd.
Oh, you see, hang on a minute. You can't start going conspiracy theories, and by the way, I'm doing whatever QAnon or whatever, that used to mean okay. Apparently that now means something ridiculous.
That's white supremacist.
Not when I was a 6-year-old, that meant okay. It was like, right. Anyway, what I'm learning this evening, which I just want to say that I'm really super frustrated about, is what I'm learning this evening is how divided America is and what a bogeyman they have made Donald Trump. And I was hoping to find some people, certainly from the left, to be able to talk to who'd say something sensible. But these conspiracy theories are useless. Alan, I've really enjoyed being told that everyone's QAnon. Thank you so much for your time. Speak later. Right, we're back in the studio. Now, we saw how President Trump spoke about energy and how important it is and how the crisis is not just affecting the UK, but also America. So, joining me now is Clive Moffat, an advisor to the UK government on energy. He didn't seem too optimistic. What are you looking at this winter? What do you think?
I think we've got a real problem. I think there are two things. In terms of the UK, we've got a problem of price security, which we've heard a lot about, capping. What we haven't heard so much about is supply security, except yesterday when Ofgem announced that there was a real risk, which I've been warning about for some months, of energy rationing because of the shortage of gas and ultimately electricity as well. So on two of those issues, I think we need some urgent rethinking, very urgent rethinking. The events of the last couple of weeks have increased the cost of the capping program that was announced on the 1st of October because of the downward fall of sterling. And we buy our gas it's designated in US dollars. So we are in a situation where we are going into a winter where we are heavily dependent on imported gas for heat and power. And we basically are going to have a very expensive program of capping. Now, the problem is that it's been cobbled together because it was easier to do to simply set a price for energy rates for business and consumers, for gas and for power. The trouble with that is it's a blanket scheme. And while energy bills rising is a problem, real problem for some people, some households and some businesses, it's not a crisis for everybody. And so there's an issue here about why don't we target this and save ourselves tens of billions of pounds of additional government borrowing compared to the...
slow down. So why don't we target what?
We should target those who are most in need.
those above average incomes who are not in fuel poverty. We should target all those who are threatened with fuel poverty, which may mean that they spend enough, say something like 10% of their disposable income on energy. We should basically focus on those, and we should basically look at businesses in two forms. Smaller firms with 3 million of them. They have very different energy profiles and need a different way of looking at things, and I think we should help them by having a suspension of the VAT that they pay on their energy bills rather than a direct intervention on the price. And secondly, for the bigger businesses, which are really dependent on gas for heat, then we should basically suspend climate change levies as a way of helping them with their energy bills.
What are climate change? So I'm not very good at maths, as I've told most people relentlessly. I'm under the impression that the net zero thing is £50 billion a year we spend on trying to bring in net zero. Would that money be better spent on supporting the poor and the needy?
I think in terms of looking at the current situation in the next year and the next 2 or 3 years, I think there should be certainly a relook at, and the government has said there's going to do that, what is being spent on the overall expenditure on net zero. Climate change levies is one aspect of that for major businesses, and it is a problem for them on energy prices. The issue here on prices is that we need to get something which is more targeted. I estimate roughly that the cost of what I've been proposing would be more like 20 to 30 billion of additional borrowing compared to 50 to 100 billion if we continue to support consumers for 2 years as promised by Liz Truss, and also businesses for 6 months and maybe even longer.
Yeah.
But the other issue, which is even more pressing.
We have alas run out of time, unfortunately, because we reached the end of the hour, because I'm not very good. Right, would you come back on next week and talk to me about it? Because I was halfway through and I was getting there. Clive, will you?
Absolutely,
yes. I won't be here, Nigel will, you know. Thank you, Clive, advisor to the UK government on energy. Well, what a day. Coming up, it's Mark Stein. Mark, how art thou?
Oh, what did he say? He said you had a fabulous voice. Is that what the 45th President of the United States told you? Fabulous voice?
Not as fabulous as yours, old bean.
He's too kind. I'm going to have to try and get the president of Uzbekistan on or something to make up for this. We got a great show for you. We got Naomi Wolf. We have a terrible tale of the appalling behaviour of the British police. We have migrants, the migrant situation, and the union with Baroness Hoey. It's all coming along right after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB.